Hello, and thank you for joining us today. Today's session is for people who are on haemodialysis and is titled, Why is Protein So Important? Before we start, a few introductions. My name is Susan Ovington, and joining me today are
Linda Carter,
Jen Toms,
and Lucy Hyderai.
And we are all specialist renal dietitians working for Somerset Partnership NHS Foundation Trust. To go along with this webinar, you can download our handout on protein from our website at www.patientwebinar.co.uk. In today's session, we will be covering the importance of protein requirements on haemodialysis, good sources of protein and some practical tips, understanding food labels, protein supplements, and how to monitor your protein status. Now I'll hand over to Jen, who will begin this presentation.
Protein is an important nutrient for every cell in our bodies, helping to build and repair our tissues. Protein is an essential building block for our muscles, helping limbs and other body parts to move. It is estimated that the human body has over 650 muscles for our skeleton alone, but did you know our organs, our heart, kidneys and lungs are muscles too? Protein also helps to keep our skin healthy, and our skin is our body's main barrier to prevent infection. It's important to note that as we get older and during illness, our bodies need more protein. If your protein intake is low, your body will take this protein from your muscles. It's important to keep your muscles strong to help you with your daily tasks and reduce the risks of falls. Protein is also found in your blood. This form of protein is called albumin. Your body makes this protein in your liver from the food that you eat. I like to think of albumin as the body's postman. It delivers nutrients, vitamins, minerals and energy that you get from your food to the rest of your body. Albumin also helps to keep fluid that you drink to stay within your cells and blood vessels. And thirdly, albumin will help your body to fight infection. Your albumin levels will be checked monthly as part of your routine screening.
So we know, Jen, that many people are told not to eat much protein before they start dialysis treatment. So why is it that once they have dialysis, they need more protein?
Yes, Linda, you're right. You need more protein on dialysis. When your kidneys are not working properly, haemodialysis will remove the build-up of waste products and fluid from your blood. But dialysis will also remove some of the good things as well, such as albumin, the protein in your blood. It's estimated that you can lose around 7 to 8 grams of protein during one session of haemodialysis. It's important to note that albumin can be lowered by other things like infection, inflammation or recent hospitalization. Although they are not directly linked to food intake, you are less likely to eat well when you're not feeling well. Your body's protein needs are often higher during times of illness. So eating enough protein can help you to live well for longer.
Why is it often difficult for you to eat enough protein every day when you have haemodialysis?
So having dialysis every day can bring quite a few barriers to people's lifestyles. So a lot of people have to have dialysis for 4 hours and they may be travelling to and from dialysis. So potentially that could lead to up to sort of 7 hours out of their day. So there is a big time element. So people might be missing their breakfast or they may even miss their main meal due to being out of the house. Lots of people often report that they suffer with a poor appetite, and this can be down to a number of factors. So nausea and vomiting can be a main side effect of having dialysis, as can taste changes. So people often go off having hot meat meals and prefer to have cold meat instead. Having to take a number of medications can have an impact on someone's appetite, or they may simply just be feeling too tired to cook.
So how much protein do you need? If you have a healthy body weight, we would recommend a range of 1.1 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of dry weight, or you might know this as target weight. So for a person weighing 80 kilograms or 12 stone 9 pounds, they would need 88 to 96 grams of protein a day, whereas a person weighing 65 kilograms would need 71 to 78 grams of protein a day. Later in this webinar, we will explain more about what this means in practical terms. Protein requirements are adjusted for those who are underweight or those who are overweight. And as Jen mentioned earlier, you may need more protein when you are unwell or to help with wound healing. Your dietitian can help you to work out how much protein you do need.
So before we go on to discuss more about protein, we are aware that some of the foods which we're about to show you are rich sources of potassium and phosphate. Please bear this in mind if you're currently on a restriction, and speak to your dietitian if you're considering reintroducing some of these foods into your diet. For good phosphate control, it is important to always take your phosphate binders as directed, if they are prescribed. So what are good sources of dietary protein? Well, meat is a really good source of protein. Ideally, fresh meat is best, as processed meat, such as sausages and packaged ham, contain additives which can increase your salt and your phosphate intake. Fish is also a good source of protein. To protect the environment, sustainable fish should be chosen where possible. Look out for these logos on packaging which represent sustainable fish. It is important to eat a variety of fish for health and sustainability. 2 portions of fish, one of which should be oily, per week is recommended. Dairy foods, such as milk, also contain protein.
Susie, tell me, do all milks contain the same amount of protein?
No, they can vary actually. So whole, skimmed and lacto-free milks have a similar protein content, while goat and soy milk contain slightly less. Almond, hazelnut, oat and coconut milk are all very low in protein and would not be recommended unless they are needed for other health reasons. You may also see some other milks available which are actually enriched with protein, such as Arla Bob skimmed milk, which you can see in this picture on the right. Yogurts can really vary in protein content. Try look for a yogurt containing more than 7 grams of protein per 100 grams. Or try a high protein yogurt such as skyr, which can contain up to 20 grams of protein per pot and is available in different forms. Cheese is a useful protein source. Again, avoid processed cheeses which are higher in phosphate and salt. And milk puddings such as rice pudding and custard seen in these pictures contain 4 grams of protein per pot. So some of the vegetarian sources I'll go through now. Eggs contain about 8 grams of protein, which if you think is similar to the amount of protein which is lost during a dialysis session. They can therefore be a good breakfast on dialysis days or make a good sandwich filling or a lunchtime meal. Pulses, which include peas, beans and lentils, are a handy protein source which can be added to meals to increase the protein content. And soy protein is a really versatile ingredient and can be used in many different forms. For example, tofu, which is made from soybean, can be added to stir fries and salads. Or soybeans themselves can be eaten alone or used as soy milk, miso or tempeh. Corn is a vegetarian meat substitute and it's sold in a range of forms from mince to fillets, so can easily be swapped with meat. Nuts and seeds are a handy snack form of protein and essential fats. They do contain potassium, so take care if your potassium levels tend to be at the higher end. And many of you may not be aware, but grains such as oats, barley, rice and quinoa can also add protein to a meal. Quinoa is a particularly good source of protein.
Are animal sources of protein better than vegetable sources of protein?
No, not necessarily. Protein from animal sources contain the full range of 9 essential amino acids needed by the body, but so do soya, quinoa, and corn. You can also get all the amino acids you need by combining other plant sources of protein, for example, pulses and cereals.
So what about the potassium content of these foods?
Well, yes, many of these foods do contain potassium. However, meat and fish also contain potassium. These vegetarian sources of protein can be a good exchange for meat sources. I would recommend avoiding having both vegetarian and meat or fish protein in the same meal if there is concern about your potassium level.
Thank you, Susie. I'll now go on to talk a bit more about protein. So on this slide, we have some examples of foods that contain 7 to 9 grams of protein. So we've got things like the beans, lentils, and chickpeas, which are your vegetarian pulses. Carbohydrates can actually contribute quite a bit to your protein intake. So things like pasta, egg noodles, and quinoa can help increase the content of protein in your meal. People that have high protein requirements may struggle to meet their protein needs using processed sources of meat. For example, 8 slices of chorizo would give you 7 grams of protein, or 4 slices of wafer-thin ham would give you 8 grams of protein. If you were an 80-kilo person, you would need to have around 10 portions of these foods a day to meet your requirements.
Here are some examples of food portions that contain more protein. If you were to have a medium bowl of cornflakes with milk, you would have about 5 to 7 grams of protein. But if you were to swap that and have a large bowl of porridge oats made with milk instead, you would have approximately 17 grams of protein. A standard pot of yogurt has just about 7 grams of protein, whereas high protein varieties can contain 20 grams of protein or 4 times more. Having quite a small portion of meat, 50 grams or 2 ounces, can significantly help you to meet your protein needs. If you put 1 to 2 slices of cold roast meat in a sandwich, that sandwich could provide 15 to 20 grams of protein, and that would be much better than 2 to 4 slices of wafer-thin ham, which would only give you about 4 to 8 grams of protein.
On this slide, we have some examples of foods that contain 30 to 35 grams of protein. So as you can see, meat and fish are very good sources of protein. You could have any type of roast meat that could be pork, lamb, beef, chicken or turkey, and that would give you 35 grams or potentially even more than that.
So how would a vegetarian get this amount of protein in a meal?
It can be quite difficult for someone who's a vegetarian to get that much in one hit. I would recommend having 2 good protein sources together. So for example, a corn bolognese with a large amount of pasta, or having something like an omelette or a frittata with perhaps 3 eggs and some cheese. It's important to aim to have at least 1 meal a day that gives you this much protein to help you meet your protein requirements for the day.
And what tips do you have for eating more protein if someone is on a limited budget?
So it can be a good idea to look out for the reduced sections in your supermarket. These foods can be individually portioned at home and frozen for a later date. If you have a little more time with cooking, it can be an idea to use some cheaper cuts of meat, such as braised steak, shin or shoulder. It's a great way to save money and you have a tasty meal at the end of it. Slow cookers can be great for this type of cooking. The cheapest way to buy a chicken is to buy a whole chicken, and from this you'd get 2 chicken breasts, 2 thighs, drumsticks, plus wings. and you'd also have a carcass left over which you could use to make stock.
You could also consider replacing some of your meat in your casseroles or stews with lentils or beans. Or if you have well-controlled potassium, you could add them to your meal to bulk it out. By cooking extra portions for your evening meal, you can have the leftovers for lunch the next day, or you could use these leftovers later on by freezing them for another day.
Here we have some ideas to help you meet your protein intake. 2 slices of toast would give you 5 grams of protein. If you were to add 2 eggs to this, you would get 20 grams. A bowl of soup is also, as well as being high in salt and fluid, also contains very little protein, so you could swap this for a sandwich. A sandwich could have any type of filling in it, such as cheese, prawn, tuna, chicken or corned beef, and that would give you 20 grams of protein. Cornish pasty has around 11 grams of protein. A sausage roll would give you even less than that. You could perhaps swap this to another convenience meal, such as a beef burger and a bun, which give you 3 times the amount of protein. Fish fingers, mash and peas has 17 grams. If you were to swap this for a fillet of fish, and it could be any fillet of fish, this would give you around 45 grams of protein. It's important to try and aim to have a good source of protein at each of your meals to help you meet your protein requirements. Here we have some examples of high protein snacks. So we've got a chicken drumstick with 20 grams of protein. You may have noticed in the supermarkets where the sandwich aisles are that there's now quite a lot of protein snacks on offer. Things like boiled eggs or chicken bites, falafel and hummus, or even a high protein yogurt. If you're struggling to get enough protein at your main meals, it can be a good idea to have some of these high protein snacks. Things like biscuits, sweets and crisps contain very little protein, so it may well really help you meet your requirements if you make this kind of swap.
If you're buying a convenience meal or a sandwich or a snack, it can be helpful to look at food labels to identify how much protein it contains. If this is a main meal, it really should provide at least 20 grams of protein, but better if it contains more. You can see here that for 1 serving, this pack would provide 25 grams of protein. So if we think back to our previous example of a person weighing 80 kilograms, whose daily protein requirements are 88 to 96 grams of protein, the meal above would only be a quarter of their daily requirements. For a person weighing 65 kilograms, it would only be a third of their daily protein requirements. So it's good to think about this in terms of how much you would normally eat for your main meal of the day. You often tell us that on dialysis days you struggle to prepare your meals. Convenience meals can be an option to ensure you have an easily prepared main meal, and there are a good range available. These can be from Wiltshire Farm Foods, from Oak House Foods, or supermarket own brand. It's important to look at food labels and choose those with a higher protein content. So here we have some more popular convenience meals. You can see that a roast meat dinner gives you around 30 grams of protein, so that's a pretty good source of protein for a main meal. Whereas if you look at the corn vegetable lasagna, it only has 17 grams of protein, so that is not quite so ideal for you. The chicken, bacon and pasta bake combines 4 sources of protein. So you have chicken, bacon, pasta and a cheese sauce, and that would give you 35 grams of protein per serving.
So here we have a meal plan suggestion for someone of 80 kilos. At breakfast time, perhaps having a large bowl of porridge made with milk, or a small cooked breakfast, which would give you 17 grams of protein. At lunchtime, having a chicken salad sandwich, a yogurt and blueberries would give you 25 grams. If you were to have a home-cooked meal with roast pork, potatoes and vegetables, this would give you 45 grams. And a bedtime snack of 2 biscuits with some cheese and an apple would be 10 grams. So in total, this comes to 97 grams of protein, which would meet the upper requirements for an 80-kilo person.
So Linda, what would you advise if someone is struggling to eat enough protein?
Eating enough protein every day is difficult and sometimes impossible. Nutritional supplements can help in the shorter and sometimes longer term to help you to meet your requirements. Your renal dietitian can advise you on the prescribing of suitable supplements. These come in a range of styles and flavours and can provide up to 20 grams of protein in a small volume. These can be taken solely on their own or mixed into food and drinks, and we do have recipe booklets available.
And what about commercial protein bars or powders? Are there any brands that you would recommend?
There are a wide range of commercial protein products available in supermarkets and health food shops. These include cereal and chocolate bars. These are generally not recommended as they can be high in potassium and/or phosphate. It's best to check the label, and if the product has no information on potassium or phosphate, then either it's best not to take it or to speak to your dietitian first.
Okay, thank you. So how can we tell if someone is eating enough protein?
We look at your blood results every month. We look at your urea, your phosphate, your albumin, and something called CRP, all of which can be affected when you're eating less well or unwell. If we have any concerns, we will ask you about your current nutritional intake, and we can compare that with information you may have given us before. We look for any changes in your pre and your post dialysis weights to assess changes in your dry weight. We check your hand grip strength before dialysis every 3 to 6 months to look at your muscle strength, and we can compare those results with previous results we have for you and the trend for you as an individual. You may recognise the machine displayed. We might ask you about your skin condition, as when your protein intake is poor, you may be more at risk of developing sores. Then once a year in Somerset, we carry out a very full nutritional assessment using a method called subjective global assessment. We ask you to complete a food diary and food frequency questionnaire to give us as much detail as possible so that we can closely look at your nutritional intake. We look at weight changes over recent months, areas of muscle wasting, and loss of fat stores. But there's no single marker that can tell us as your dietitian whether you're eating enough protein. We are very much looking for trends over time for all the indicators above, and we'll use that information to advise you as an individual.
Thanks, Linda. So to summarise, it's important to try and have a good protein source at every meal. Always have a high protein snack, such as tuna, cheese and crackers, or a yogurt in hand. Try to get into the habit of checking food labels to help you choose products with the most amount of protein. Consider a protein supplement if you are unable to increase your dietary protein intake. And remember, take your phosphate binders as directed. Where there is protein, there may also be phosphate. Your albumin is lowered when you have too much fluid, so always keep within your recommended fluid allowance. So thank you very much for listening. We really hope that you found this webinar helpful. Don't forget about our website below, where you can find a copy of our protein diet sheet to download. We would be really grateful if you could complete the survey at the end of this presentation. And that's it. Goodbye from our team.